Got a lot to do today. A lot of stuff going on. So today I wanted to talk with you about another Christmas Eat Jesus event in the Old Testament. In chapter 21, we talked about this a little bit already. Abraham takes Hagar and Ishmael out into the desert for them to die. And then God saves them and off. And the very next chapter is this confusing command that God gives to Abraham. 22nd chapter begins like this. Sometime later, God tested Abraham and said to him, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, go into the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." Now, that should disturb you, I would think, that the test is to sacrifice your son, but that's not really what the test is. See, the test is about the promise. The New Testament writers, when they talk about Isaac, normally he's just in a list of descendants of the promise. He's one of the descendants of the promise, the heir through the promise, except for the writer of Hebrews. The writer of the Hebrews, to the Hebrews, says in the 11th chapter that this event marks a significant faith victory for Abraham. That's what I want to talk to you about, a faith victory. The oath that God gave to Abraham in the 12th chapter, again in the 15th chapter, was that his descendants would be like the stars of the sky and the sand of the seashore. And within just a very short time, probably within just months, his son through Hagar, Ishmael, is gone. That's his firstborn son, through the slave woman. And now God says, I want you to take your other son, in fact, your only son, and I want you to sacrifice him. Well, if he does that, what happens to the promise? What happens to the oath? If that, you see where my mind goes? And I'm sure that it has to be that Abram went there. And rather than challenge God this time, he challenged him last time. How do I know that what you're saying is true? I'm too old to have a child. He doesn't do that this time. There's been a change. And that change is the victory. That's what we really are shooting for in our lives. The event itself, because the Old Testament is stuck on the physical heir, like the bloodline, so the event itself seems barbaric to us. But the test, that I think we can understand. See, I'll put it to you like this. For those of you who know me, you know my mom and dad have been in a really dark place. They're in an assisted living place. They don't like it. The house is being sold. They're in their 90s. They've lost, a capacity to take care of themselves, and so it's a hard time of life. And so, I each Monday I send them a letter, and so I sent them a letter, and in the letter I talked about this basic concept of how do we approach life when our faith stuff is really, really challenged? And what I shared with them, I would like to share with you. That if we enter into, this is a pretty dark place. I mean, I have to admit, when I read this, I'm like, whoa, it seems so dark to me. When we enter into dark places, which is symbolic of trials, troubles, or in this case, testing, if we go in with a mindset of faith victory, it kind of changes the way, not kind of, it changes the way that we perceive what's happening. If I've already decided that God is good, His plan is perfect, and in the end, His plan will be achieved, no matter what, that's what's going to happen. And so if I enter trouble with that attitude of faith and trusting, then I'm not as prone to say, well, I'm not really sure that's what He wants me to do. I'm not really, how can I know that this is God and not just me making this up? And so Abram, he never questions. One time in this whole story. Theologians for millennia now have suggested that this is the end of child sacrifice in ancient times, that this is actually symbolic of the end. But it's actually theologically, I think that could be part of it, but that's not the main part of it. The main part of it is this understanding that Abraham has that God is faithful. And so he goes into this faithfully. That's what the writer to the Hebrews says. There's no question about why would he do this. He just does it. And in the end, the story is about how God deals with men and women of faith when they enter into a trial or trouble, trusting Him in advance. The story says He provides. He provided a sacrifice for Abraham. And that's the Jesus moment. And of course, we all recognize that. The moment of provision to those who have faith. And the story is a very clear hearkening of the messianic provision for our souls. That God provides an offering on our behalf, and all He asks of us is to trust Him, to be faithful and trust Him through everything. That He wants to bring what's good. That's what He's the good gift giver. He wants to bring us the hope and the peace and the joy that we've been talking about on Sundays. He wants to give those things to us. That's His desire. And we just have to trust Him. And sometimes, you wonder, is this really good? Well, I think it would be better for me. In fact, I know it's better for me, and probably would be better for you, to approach these things the way that Abraham does. Okay, if that's what you say you need to have done, I'll go ahead and do that. And just go do it. It's kind of fascinating when you surrender like that. And then in the midst of trusting, how it changes the trouble. At least it did for me. And so I invite you to trust God's plan, and that He will provide for you exactly what you need. That is a great Christmas gift. I told my mom and dad that what they should do, what I do, and I can't really tell them what they should do because I'm not there. I'm not in their situation. So I just tell them what I do. What I do is I have decided to trust God and to trust His promises. And so Jesus makes a promise. I will come back and take you home. That's a promise that Jesus makes to me that really, really has its greatest power in my life and its greatest strength in the deep, dark places, because that's where the promises of God belong. And so I write those promises out on cards, and I keep them and I memorize them because I need them. I need that affirmation and that knowledge of God's desire for me. And He has a desire for you as well. So I pray that you trust God and His promises and have a great, great day. And I'll see you next